So here's a wild story for you. A guy scams America out of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? He serves less than 2 years in a cushy prison, and then Hollywood turns his life into this huge blockbuster movie. We're talking about Jordan Belfort, the real Wolf of Wall Street. And what we're going to get into is how he managed to turn massive fraud into, believe it or not, global thing. And really, let's just start with his own words, because this quote, it gets right to the heart of his entire story. He says, "I was guilty of being greedy, but so is everybody else." I mean, wow. It just makes you wonder, right? Was this guy just a one-of-a-kind con man? Or was he something else? A product of a culture that maybe kind of secretly admires the hustle no matter what it takes? That's the question that's going to hang over everything we talk about. Okay, so let's rewind. Our story doesn't actually start on Wall Street. Nope. It starts in a working-class neighborhood in Queens, New York. And from a very, very young age, Jordan Belfort had this one all-consuming drive. He needed to get rich. And as you'll see, he proved pretty quickly he was willing to sell just about anything to make that a reality. And when you look at his early life, you start to see a pattern emerge, like right away. At 16 years old, he's not just scooping Italian ices for pocket money, he makes $20,000 in one summer. Think about that. Then he gets into dental school, but on the very first day, the dean tells the class that dentistry isn't the way to get rich. So what does Belfort do? He just gets up and leaves on day one. After that, he starts this door-to-door meat and seafood business that totally blows up, and then just as quickly goes bankrupt. You see it, right? This incredible drive, a natural gift for selling, and this constant pattern of boom and bust. So when that meat business completely crashes and burns, you'd think the lesson would be about, I don't know, managing inventory or something. But for Belfort, no. The big takeaway for him was that the product was irrelevant. It didn't matter. Steaks, stocks, it could have been anything. It was all the same. He had this epiphany. His real superpower wasn't what he was selling, it was how he sold it. The guy was a master of persuasion, plain and simple. And that realization, well, it led him right to the front door of Wall Street. He gets a job at a legit firm, starts learning how the whole game works, and then 1987 happens. The market crashes hard on what we now call Black Monday. And while literally everyone else is panicking, seeing total disaster, Belfort looks at the chaos and sees the perfect opportunity. You see, the world of penny stocks was like the Wild West compared to the rest of Wall Street. Forget those tiny commissions you'd get at a big firm. Here, you could pull in a 50% commission on a single trade. 50%. It was totally unregulated, this wild world of pink sheets. And the investors? They weren't big, sophisticated players. They were just regular, everyday people. You didn't need a fancy degree. All you needed was a fast mouth and a phone. It was a kingdom practically built for a hustler like him. So, armed with this knowledge, what does he do? He starts his own firm. And he gives it this very grand, very respectable name, Stratton Oakmont. Sounds like it's been around for 100 years, right? Trustworthy, prestigious. The reality? It was a chaotic boiler room setup in a strip mall, running on nothing but pure adrenaline and greed. And his playbook? It was kind of genius in how simple it was. He didn't want Wall Street veterans with their stuffy rules. No, he recruited these young, hungry kids who had zero experience but were absolutely desperate to make money. Then he trained them himself using his own high-pressure sales system, basically teaching them how to just bulldoze through any objection. And who were they calling? They were targeting everyday people, teachers, mechanics, people saving for retirement, and selling them this incredibly powerful, intoxicating dream of getting rich quick. So what was the actual scam? Well, they were running a classic pump and dump. If you're not familiar, it's pretty simple securities fraud. You buy a ton of some worthless stock for just pennies a share. Then you create a massive amount of fake hype to drive the price way up. That's the pump. And once it's at its peak, you sell all of your shares at once. That's the dump. And here's exactly how the machine worked at Stratton. Step 1. Belfort and his inner circle would secretly buy up massive blocks of some totally worthless stock. Step 2. They'd unleash their army of salespeople on the phones to create this insane frenzy of hype and excitement. Step 3, as all these regular investors start buying in, the stock price just skyrockets. And then, step 4, right at the very peak, Belfort and his crew would dump all of their shares, making millions literally in an instant. And step 5, the stock crashes back down to nothing, leaving all those investors holding worthless paper. And boy, did it work. The money started pouring in so fast, it was just obscene. Stratton Oakmont stopped being a brokerage firm and turned into something else entirely. It was like a nonstop carnival of greed, fueled by a crazy amount of wealth and just a total, complete disregard for any rules. Just to put this into perspective for you, remember that meat business that went bankrupt? He was making 100 grand a month there, which is already insane, right? Well, at Stratton, 100 grand a month was basically pocket change. It wasn't long before he was pulling in millions of dollars a week. And the office culture? It was a direct reflection of all that excess. I mean, this was not your typical 9 to 5. We were talking about strippers performing in the conference rooms. The daily soundtrack was screaming phones and air horns. You had lines of cocaine being snorted off of compliance manuals, of all things. If you were a top performer, you'd get cash and Rolexes handed to you right there on the spot. But if you underperformed, you were publicly humiliated and then fired. It was basically a cult of money, and Jordan Belfort was its charismatic, all-powerful leader. But you know how these stories go. An empire built entirely on lies. It just can't last. As the money and the excess got bigger and bigger, so did the recklessness. The whole operation just started to rot from the inside out. Right around the same time that law enforcement finally started to connect the dots. The walls were starting to close in. And Belfort himself? He was just spiraling completely out of control. His drug use was off the charts. He famously crashed his Ferrari while he was high on Quaaludes, with his little daughter in the car with him. But maybe the most perfect example of this, he insisted on sailing his gigantic yacht, the Naomi, straight into a violent storm, totally against his captain's advice. And what happened? The yacht sank. They had to be rescued by the Italian Navy. I mean, you can't write a better metaphor for his life at that point. And you can just see the dominoes start to fall. First, Forbes magazine and the SEC starts sniffing around. Then the yacht sinks. Then comes the inevitable FBI raid on the Stratton offices. But even then, Belfort couldn't help himself. While he's actively under investigation, he illegally wires millions of dollars to a secret Swiss bank account. That was the final nail in the coffin. In 1998, it was all over. He was arrested. So now he's facing up to 30 years behind bars. And what does Jordan Belfort do? He does the one thing he does best. He sells. Only this time, he sold out his friends, his partners, his employees, everyone, to get a deal. And what came next was a reinvention so wild, it's almost as shocking as the crimes themselves. Get this. In prison, his cellmate was, and I'm not making this up, the comedian Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong. So Belfort is telling him all these insane stories about his life, and Chong just looks at him and says, "Man, you should write this stuff down." And so he did. That manuscript he wrote in prison, it became the best-selling memoir, The Wolf of Wall Street. Okay, so think about it. After masterminding this massive fraud that cost investors over $200 million, how much time do you think he actually served? The answer? Just 22 months. That's it. He cooperated with the FBI, he turned on absolutely everyone he ever worked with, and in return he got a sentence that, to a lot of people, felt like a slap on the wrist. And after prison, he didn't just fade away. Oh no, he published the book, and it became a huge bestseller. Then he sold the movie rights to Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio, and it became an even bigger blockbuster. And today? He travels the world as a motivational speaker and a sales coach, using the very story of his crimes to teach people, and this is the ironic part, sales and ethics. So let's just look at the final score here, because the contrast it's pretty staggering. For Jordan Belfort, the consequence was 22 months in a minimum security prison, which was then followed by a best-selling book, a blockbuster movie, and global fame. For his thousands of victims, the consequences were lost retirement savings, remortgaged homes, and for almost all of them, no financial recovery, no closure. He was ordered to pay back $110 million in restitution, but to this day, only a tiny fraction of that has ever been paid. And all of this, it leaves us with one final, pretty uncomfortable question. The movie painted him as this charismatic anti-hero. And let's be honest, audiences loved it. He has millions of social media followers today who look at him as some kind of icon of success. His whole story really forces us to look in the mirror and ask, in a culture that is so obsessed with wealth, did we really want to see Jordan Belfort punished for his greed? Or was there a small part of us that just wanted to be him?